What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. Today we've got Dan Nguyen, the Great Curator, back on the channel. If you missed my first conversation with Dan, you can go back in the archives and check it out when you're done with this video. Or if you want to get a little bit more background on Dan before we get into this video, pause this one, go watch that one, and then come back. But today, Dan joins me to talk about the Karrion Kross Transcendent Superfractor that I was able to obtain from him. I mean, look at that thing. Just amazing. This is seriously one of the best cards I've ever held in hand. You know, you hear about the Topps Transcendent Superfractors or Transcendent in general, and you get them in hand, and it's a whole nother ballgame. These are by far the best cards that Topps has ever put out for wrestling in the history. But this video just isn't about that card. In fact, it's not really about the card at all. We're going to cover some really serious topics in this video. We talk about the mindset of a super collector, how I was trying to obtain this card and get it and was just at the mercy of the seller because it's a one-of-one, how my relationship with Dan kind of led to me being able to obtain this card in the first place, and how people can better understand a dealer's perspective when you're going to a show or whether you're trading online or at a local card show. What does the dealer have in mind? What do they have to do when they're trading, buying, selling? This is honestly one of my favorite videos I've ever done for this channel, so I hope you will stick around and watch all the way to the end because there's so much good content in here. But before we get into that great conversation with the Great Curator, here's just a few ways you can help show your support for my content. You're already here. It's the easiest thing you can do. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give me a like. And share this video with everybody in the hobby. Again, if there was one video that I wanted to talk about with a kind of the modern state of the hobby and how wrestling card collectors are approaching the hobby, if I had to pick one video for you to watch, it's this video. So please share this with anybody out there that's a wrestling fan trying to get into cards, or somebody that's already in wrestling cards and they just maybe want some more information. Check out the podcast I'm a part of, Wrestling with Cards, the podcast, my solo podcast, coming out every few weeks about, I just like to kind of challenge your thinking. It's not so much talking about this is a good card, this is a bad card. It's more like the process. Again, kind of a lot of the things we're going to talk about in this video today are the things that I like to talk about on the podcast. And of course, the Worlds Collide podcast, myself and Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com, talking all things wrestling. Every Wednesday we're dropping an episode. And again, both of those podcasts are available on all popular podcast platforms, so just search Wrestling with Cards, the podcast, Worlds Collide Wrestling Card Podcast. You'll find it. And hey, if you're digging it, leave us a review. Again, share that with a friend, kind of like how I said to share this video with a friend, to just grow the listenership in the community. If you'd like to help contribute to my content monetarily, check out Wrestling with Cards on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of these videos, like all of the list of these great people here that have been part of the community for a long, long time now. I greatly appreciate their support. And if you want to pay more money, you can get access to exclusive video content. You can get access to giveaways or coupons for my eBay store. I'll talk about that in a minute. You can even join the Wrestling with Cards booking committee, come on the show quarterly, kind of dictate where the content goes. Lots of available options at Wrestling with Cards on Patreon. I mentioned eBay. Check out my eBay store, Beast Mode Collectibles. I've been running that store since 2006, but in the last year or two, it really ramped it up. And we've got a ton of wrestling cards and other sports cards and non-sport. $1.50 ship. That's kind of the price point I like to stay at. So there's no excuse not to go buy some cards, right? And there's bundled discounts where you can get up to 30% off for 10 items or more. And you never know when I'm going to run a flash sale. Check me out on social media at Zhan Morning, pretty much all popular social media platforms at this point. And of course, links to buy me a coffee if you want to give a donation to keep these videos coming out. Everything I mentioned is in the show notes, so when you're done watching this video, check the show notes before you get out of here and, show your support however it is, because without the support of people, we can't keep these videos going. We've got Dan, the Great Curator, back on the show for a very special episode. We're going to talk about this thing. Karrion Kross Transcendent Superfractor that I got from you. So first, this is our first time in person saying thank you for hooking me up with that. And we're just going to tell the story of how I obtained the card, its journey, because it's kind of crazy when you stop and think about how this happened. And then I want to get your opinion on some takes from like trading perspective, buying, selling, dealer perspective. I don't think a lot of people within wrestling cards understand what you guys as dealers at these shows deal with on a constant basis, whether the values and money and how you look at things and view things. So I'm just going to start by saying this card was available on eBay for the longest time for just shy of $4,000. And I messaged the guy and I was like, I really want this card. What is a realistic offer? And I shot him some comps based on some other talent around the same level as him that had either been cut or were still active, and they just weren't the top tier superstars, because that's kind of what you do on these one-of-ones. But also at the one-of-ones, you're kind of at the mercy of the seller as well. So I was just like, all right, we're going to put this on the back burner and see what happens. Next thing I know, it's a week of Dallas show, most recent Dallas show. And Adam Gelman messages me. He's like, hey, Dan's got the Superfractor. I'm like, what the heck? So I'm going to let you take it from here.
Okay. So in an alternate parallel timeline here, I know that you are a big Karrion Kross super collector. Okay. I don't know how you would classify yourself, super fan, super collector, but I follow you on Instagram. So I see your hundreds of posts and all these different Karrion Kross cards all the time. Right. So, being a collector myself, I know that, the Superfractor, the one-of-one, is like the holy grail for any collector. So I remember seeing the Karrion Kross Superfractor pop up on eBay several months ago, and I saw it and I got excited for you because I was like, oh, he's going to get a chance to get it, right? And I messaged you about it, and I remember you telling me, oh, you really wanted it, but it was just too expensive for how you valued it. I remember you saying that you valued it like 1/5 of whatever the price that it was listed at. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm sure he'll get it at some point. And I follow Superfractors online on my eBay searches, and I just keep seeing that stay there for months and months. And then shortly after I had that conversation with you, I think he got released too. So he wasn't even like relevant in the WWE universe anymore at that time. So, but anyways, I keep seeing it there. And, I just kind of like had my eye on it for a while, just because I wanted to see if it would ever get scooped up. So anyways, come Dallas, right? The owner who I've known before, I've done previous deals with him before. His name's Kelly. He comes to my table and brings me that. And I didn't know that was his eBay account. So I never had made that connection before. And I saw it and I was like, whoa, what are you doing with this? And then he told me, yeah, I had it on eBay, among some other cards that he had that I wanted of his. So when I saw it, I said, okay. I told myself, I need to get this card. I need to get this card for two reasons. Number one, I need to get it out of his hands.
Yes.
So that I can get it to Zane. But on the other side, I was like, ooh, I'm going to enjoy holding this over Zane's head for a long time. Once I get this, you got it for me a lot quicker than I thought. I thought I would have some time to really dangle it in front of you. I should have held on to it for at least a couple more weeks.
Who knew? I didn't even
way more money for it. But anyways, I saw it there at the show, and from a dealer's perspective, I think this is what you want to hear. You never know what's going to come to your table at a show. It could be something totally random. And one thing that I always try to do is whenever I see something that maybe I don't want personally, I always think to myself, do I know anybody that wants things? I'm always looking for things. People message me all the time. They say, hey, can you keep your eye out for this card or whatever? So I say, yeah, sure, whatever. And I just happen to know that this is the card that you really wanted. This is the card that you needed. I don't know if there's any other more valuable Karrion Kross card out there.
There isn't.
Than the Transcendent Superfractor.
I can just put it in a little bit of perspective. Yeah. I just saw the Topps Chrome Superfractor auto. I'd been watching it for a while too. And I also thought it was a little too expensive. And the day that he got back, we're now seeing this in wrestling cards, the effect like sports cards have, where an event starts rising or dropping prices. That thing just flew off at the buy it now price.
Yeah.
So, but this one's still the top tier card. Yeah.
So I saw that card and I was like, man, I need to try to get this for Zhan somehow. Right. So I started negotiating with the guy, and, he had his eBay price. Basically, he said, oh, I want this for it. And I'm like, dude, come on, man. Because I kind of know him where I can speak very candidly to him. I don't know him that well, but I know him enough. Like at a show, we can have a conversation that you couldn't have over eBay messages.
Sure.
Right. So I said, okay, let me see all the stuff that you got. So I pulled out all these other cards from his box that I wanted. And I told him, I said, okay, I tried to do a bundle deal because that I knew that's the only way I could get the Zhan. He wanted like $2,000 for it, something like that, right? I think. And I remember what you said, how you valued it, like 1/5 the price. And I used that to kind of value it myself. I said, okay, if he's valuing it like 1/5, then it's going to be like $500 to like $700-800, something like that. So I told him that's where I kind of wanted to be on it, and he said no originally, but because I was able to bundle some other cards in the deal, basically I made it work somehow where I got the card out of his hands, and I had to like kind of really finesse it a little bit, but I knew that I had to do it because if it left my table, it could be gone forever. Like you may not see it again. And he actually told me that he wanted to move it too. So I had to tell him, I said, look, it's not for me. It's for my buddy. He's a super collector. You might even know him. You might listen to his podcast, whatever. So I'm basically giving him some backstory to kind of loosen him up a little bit. I had to tenderize him a little bit on that. And he went with it. He went with it. I think he was just ready to move on from that card. He is a big collector himself, and he told me that he likes to hang on to things until he doesn't, he's enjoyed it, and then he just lets it move on. So at that time, he was ready to do that. Plus, it helped also because there was an AJ Styles superfractor that sold for like $720 or something like that. So I said, look, AJ Styles, very relevant. It just sold for this much. This guy, he's on the indies. I told him he's never coming back to WWE.
Yeah,
he's done.
Who knew?
He's done. He's useless, right? So let me just give you it for this much. Let me bundle it together with all this stuff. And we were able to work out a deal. Very, very thankful for that. He actually cut me a really good deal on this bundle of cards. I got like 5 different cards from him. And that card was part of it. It wasn't the main centerpiece for him, but to me, it was like one of the main things because I knew what I wanted to do with it. And then after I got it, I had a little bit of fun. I was posting a couple teasers on my Instagram, and I didn't say anything to you. I was waiting for you to contact me. And within like 10 minutes of the post going up, you contact me right away. And then we just negotiated a little bit, and then I was able to get you the card. But I was very happy that I was able to get the card in your hands at a price that you thought was fair, and it just worked out for everybody. And then even now that he's come back, like that makes me even more excited and happy about the deal because now you really can enjoy the card and follow him on that journey.
Right. So that's kind of how it happened. And then we'll backtrack a little bit. So let's start with that other dealer. Was he an actual wrestling card collector, or was he somebody that just kind of dabbles in everything?
I would say he's legit collector. He's got the Vince McMahon 1/1, the red, which I'm trying to get off of him.
I saw you trying to get that.
He's got like 5 or 6 superfractors from the Transcendence set. So I don't know how he got it, but he is a legit collector. Okay. And he's what people would say he's got diamond hands, where he doesn't need the money. He just kind of like enjoys the hobby. He's a true collector from my perspective. He's got an eBay store and all that stuff too. But really, you gotta catch him on the right day.
Gotcha.
To do a deal with him, basically.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's what the case was, because when I sent him, when I was just going back and forth with him, I wasn't saying like, this is the price I'm willing to pay. I was like, this is like a ballpark, would you consider an offer? And I just got a flat response that says no. Like I didn't even get a counter offer or, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And I think that's something that's super important. And you just talked about it, is the back and forth that you can get going with the trade. So on the actual trade, you were able to get some other things. So obviously we were thinking about my card, but then there was other things that I'm sure you benefited on as well. If you could talk a little bit about that mindset when going into a bundled trade.
Yeah. So like, with the Karrion Kross, if I just wanted it by itself, the way I approached it would be, he would charge me a premium on it because it's a 1/1 superfractor and it's his card. He can charge whatever he wants, right?
Right. And you can as well. Like super collectors are at the mercy of the person holding the 1/1. Like comps are out the window, and you just got to do the best you can.
Yeah. So I kind of thought to myself, okay, if I can get it, if I can average it out across like 5 or 6 cards, then it would make sense for him. He gets the amount that he wants. And he gets rid of some cards, and then I can get the pieces that I need to kind of sell off or do whatever to make the deal make sense for me. So that's kind of how I approached it. And I wanted to get the card for you, but I couldn't just like buy the card by itself from it. So I had to bundle it to get the other cards that I wanted for myself, and it worked out for me in that regards. But in terms of negotiating with him, like, this is why I always tell people it's very important to go to shows, because a lot of what we do in the hobby is personal interactions. When you negotiate on eBay or Instagram, it's very easy to say no, one word answers. It's very easy to take things out of context. But when you're actually trying to like interact with a person through conversation, you can start to build a rapport with people. And a lot of people, like, if you take a very business-like approach, a very transactional-like approach, it's easy to say no because it's all about the money. But we are all collectors, right? We can all appreciate cards. We can all appreciate people building super collections and things like that. So when you strike up that conversation, you would be surprised how much easier it is to deal with people once you kind of start that conversation, rather than from coming at it from like a collector perspective versus a transaction perspective,
Yeah, I think there's definitely a happy medium. I've done that before too, where I've got something and like, what you've got in the card. So if you can make even just a little bit, but then even more so help out that person, get that out of your hands into somebody's hands that it is going to be beneficial to, 100% agree. So the other cards that you got, were they PC cards for yourself, or were they actually cards that you ended up moving already and actually did better on the deal overall with?
Well, they were all like cards that I wanted in my collection. Most of the cards that I have, I always, they're personal to me, so I enjoy them, and I put them in my showcase because I need inventory to fill up the cases and things like that.
Gotcha.
And surprisingly, I moved all but two of them, which I'm keeping in my personal collection. So I got a Sergeant Slaughter Transcendent Green Auto. That's my Sergeant Slaughter is one of my PCs. So that's not going anywhere. I got a Rhea Ripley out of 25 Transcendent Auto, which also I'm really big on her, so I haven't like put that out yet. But I had this Rock Undisputed out of 25, and somebody ate that up really quick. I had a Becky Lynch Gold Refractor Topps Chrome Gold. Somebody bought that really quick for me. I had an Iron Sheik Transcendent Auto, which I gave to another one of my friends who collects Iron Sheik stuff, and then the Superfractor. So I got all that, and all I have left is the Sergeant Slaughter and Rhea Ripley, which are like my own personal cards. But it made the deal work for me because I was able to like recoup all my money back, plus move the card to you. And I think I got the cards in the right people's hands.
Right. Everybody wins. Like the guy who got rid of the cards won. You got some cards for yourself. I got my card. Some other people got some cards. You did perfect on it. And I think that's like from the dealer perspective, you and him, like everybody's kind of winning, but you're also understanding of that conversation. I think that's something that we run into this online, and I want to talk about that in a minute, a conversation I had with you about a trade we were trying to do. But I think it's something that a lot of people, not only at shows, but also online, if you're in a, or on the phone, however you're trying to facilitate a trade. I think that some people don't understand the value proposition of what you're asking and giving. So because you do this all the time, do you want to talk a little bit about that and like what people can expect when they're, giving something in trade to a dealer or vice versa?
Sure. In terms of the dynamics, I think this is pretty common understanding, but like when you're a dealer, you want to sell as much as you can, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're buying stuff, we all have money invested in our collections that we want to just shift that money from one card to something else by doing a trade, right? So right. So that's the dynamic that you always have to follow. Like people always want to trade, but the problem with trading is the other person has to value that card that you're trading, in a similar way that you do, and either they want it for themselves, their own personal collection, or they need something that they can move out of quick, right? So that's always like the balance that you have to do when you approach these things. So with this guy in particular, he doesn't trade. He doesn't want to trade at all. He just wants cash. So when you pay cash, from my perspective, like cash is almost at a premium. So, he probably could have got more value if he would have traded for certain things, but because he wanted cash, I had a certain value on those cards, which we discussed. We looked at comps and all that stuff. So we fairly valued all those cards. And then I gave him the cash. But in my mind, I already knew that I was going to move some of those cards already. I had buyers in mind for some of those things. And that's kind of like how I structured the deal. So, again, when I was looking at that card, the main focus was me to try to get, I really wanted to get that Superfractor for you, but I had to piece in like 5 or 6 other cards to make the deal work for me. just because I knew I wasn't going to gouge you on the price. Like I was going to basically give it to you a little bit above my cost, just to get in your hands, but I wasn't going to charge you like, 3-4 times whatever I paid for it, because that would just defeat the whole purpose of me going through all this trouble in the first place. So that's kind of how I approach it. I paid up cash for the whole deal for that lot, and I was able to piece out what I needed to do to make my money back. And now I have a couple extra cards on top of that.
So what's your opinion? And that actually leads into a question that's kind of paralleled with that. We saw a lot of people talking about the National and how prices were just like exuberant amount above what they should. But then you run into this situation where, what if you need this card, regardless of what the price is, let's say it is above comps or whatever, and you have all of this stuff that you could possibly do to trade to get into this. Like, in my opinion, that's something I always like to do, is kind of move the stuff that I like or is really popular, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter to me anymore. And I want to get that card that does matter to me. So what do you think about that perspective from the buyer perspective?
From the buyer trying to trade?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. Like,
I think that's a real problem with wrestling, is I think there's so many people that they only want to trade for like, it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say. Like, they only want to trade what they think they have in it or what their value is, and they're not willing to bundle together things to take less to get something they want.
Yeah, I think there's a couple points to this, and this is really interesting. This is a mindset that I think kind of slows down the hobby right now, where people are just trying to like get what they put into the card, right? So like if you paid like $100 for a card, you're not going to let it go for less than $100 because you're losing money. That's what people say. But I don't know if I agree with that perspective. It depends sometimes, right? It's very fluid, but the way I look at it is like you have to understand that the market changes. Like you paid $100 for a card 6 months ago, it might not be $100 today. It might be $50. The same way that same card might be $150, right? Like if somebody on the other side, if somebody knows what you paid for it, they're not going to want to pay more than what you paid, even though maybe the market is saying that it's higher. So that's a dynamic that I think people kind of have to kind of like get away from. I think that's a personal a mental block that people use, where they don't want to like lose money on it, but they don't understand that these cards, whatever the market value is, that's what it is for that card if you want to move it. And what a lot of people don't understand is they don't put value in two things. They don't put value in the time that they've had the card for personal enjoyment, right? Like, let's just say like your superfractor, you hold on to it for like 3-4 years, Karrion Kross becomes champion, you're like on cloud 9, but then let's just say you follow somebody else, right? You still had the value of owning that card for all that time and all the enjoyment that you got from it. A lot of people don't put value in that, which I think is very undervalued. And then the other part is people don't understand that the opportunity cost of having money sitting somewhere like stale inventory, where they could be flipping or doing something else and be getting another card that they could turn around or that could appreciate quicker, or they could get more enjoyment from. They don't put value in that, right? So they get kind of stuck in this mindset. And I think part of that comes from the fact that a lot of people are not very good at selling cards. This might be very controversial. Okay.
Let's hear it.
But it's like, it's hard to sell cards. You know what I mean? Like with this dude, for example, who had the Karrion Kross, if that card, he had it for like, what it was, $4,000.
Yeah.
That card was worth that much, it would have gone for that much.
Right.
But it didn't. And it just kind of sat there for a long time, and he had it on eBay. So he had the most reach in the world. Everybody saw it, but nobody wanted it, right? Until he brought it to Dallas and he found me. So it's very hard to sell cards. It's not easy. So when you're trying to do a transaction with somebody, if somebody's trying to give you cards that you couldn't move anywhere else, you have to understand that you're gonna take less value for it, right? As if you were to sell it for cash, right? You can't, if your card is worth $100, you can't necessarily expect to get $100 in value if you're expecting somebody else to do the work to move it when you couldn't move it yourself. You know what I mean?
100%.
So I think that's something that's part of the conversation a lot of people have to have. Me as a dealer, where I go to shows all the time, I can't tell you how many times people, they want to trade up to a big card, like a card that's worth like $5,000, for example, and they want to give like 10 cards for it, which
now
may add up
let
to
me
value.
let me ask on that opinion, because
Yeah.
this is something I've done. I've approached people by doing that.
Yeah.
But if like we're going to use your numbers, let's say the card was $5,000,
Uh-huh.
I would be offering to trade like $8,000 worth of cards. And I've still had people turn me down because of what you just said. It's like and we had this discussion because you're like, this is what I want for the card. And I said, well, I can give you like 3/4 of that cash, like right now. And I can trade you all these other things. And you were like, why don't you just do the work yourself and then pay me when you want?
Right. It's the work. That's what people don't understand. It's like I have one piece of gold. My friend Merlin had this great example. He's like, I have one piece of gold and somebody wants to trade me 10 pieces of silver for the gold. And then I got to go sell 10 pieces of silver to get the money that I expect in return. It's hard work and it's not easy to sell cards. That's what I keep telling people. Like, even if you put it on eBay or,
taking it to shows like you guys do,
take it to shows, it's very difficult. And when you take inventory to shows, what people don't understand too is there's a lot of overhead costs that go into setting up at a show, which is why a lot of dealers charge premiums. Like at the National, dealers are charging premiums for certain cards because it's expensive to go to the National and set up. Also, if you have showcases, right, each little spot in the showcase, that's expensive real estate. So if you're taking a card that's worth $5,000 that only takes up one space in your showcase, and then you got to fill it with like 10 other cards, it might not be appealing to a lot of people. That's why it's very difficult to do trade deals, just straight up trade deals, unless the dealer or the person giving up the more valuable card knows that they can move the card quickly, or it's a very liquid card or very desirable card to them. And I think that's the one thing that that's the disconnect that a lot of people have when they're trying to do these type of transactions. They're thinking in their mind, I'm giving you all this value, all these cards, they're worth more than this, or they're really great cards. But on the other side, they don't understand that, yeah, they might have this perceived value, but to actually move them and sell them is very difficult, and they have to take that into consideration.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And that's something that I will take in a lot of stuff because I'll get to it eventually. I'll just sell it on eBay. I know what my entry cost is, and a lot of times you're winning on the entry cost alone, regardless of what it sells for. Plus, you never know when you're able to pull some of that stuff and help people out, like you did with me and like you did with other people. But it is something, like you said it yourself, and there's other people out there that, if you did a $10,000 trade for a $5,000 card, yeah, you might come out on the better end. But if you're not doing like me and putting out thousands of listings on eBay, and you're mainly a show person, or you just don't want that much inventory all at once, that 100% makes sense.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of business model you have. Like me, I don't list a lot of bulk things on eBay. I mainly just go to shows, and I carry a lean inventory of about 60 to 80 cards. So I'm not the type of person to take on a whole bunch of cards and trade unless I really want those cards for some reason. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
So that's kind of like the dealer. I would say that's the dealer approach. So any of your followers that are watching this, that's one thing that if you want to have success in a trade, you got to take that into consideration. Also, one of the things that I love to do is I love to do the cash trade deal. So, you can trade some cards, but you got to give a little bit of cash in return. And the benefit of doing that is that from my perspective, if I'm giving up a really big card, at least I get some of my cash back, and then maybe I can make more on the back end when I sell the other cards for a higher value.
That's 100% how I look at it. It's just, I'm doing way more like lower end volume, and you're doing like higher end, less volume. So it is perspective. So last question before we get out of here. From this whole story, from the time I saw the card and all the dealer stuff we've talked about until me getting the card and all of that, what is something kind of you learned in the process that maybe specifically the wrestling card community could learn from this? Because I think a lot of people in the sports card world, and even some entertainment cards we're seeing now with Star Wars, and if you want to count F1, Pokemon, whatever, a lot of the people get these perspectives that we've talked about today, but I still have this kind of inkling that a lot of wrestling card collectors specifically struggle with these things.
I would say, if I had to wrap it up in a parting message, I would say that when we view the hobby today, we tend to view it from from a profit first mentality, right? Like cards are commodities that we trade and they're worth a lot of money and things like that. But the value comes from whatever the market determines the value to be,
Sure.
right? But I'm still coming from the fact that, I grew up as a collector, and for many years, these things were not worth money because the collector base was small. And then suddenly over the last couple of years, the collector base has grown, and that has increased the values of all our cards and made them valuable. But a lot of people forget that they're still collectibles. Right? So a card is only worth whatever somebody else is willing to pay for it if they value it. Carrying Cross, for example, you were like the only person that's willing to buy that card for that value at that time because you're a major Carrying Cross fan, right? And most people aren't. So one thing that I think is very important is that and let me just go on another tangent here.
Sure.
A lot of people get turned off by the volatility of the collectible market. Some prices can go really high, and then a couple months later they go really down, and some people get really discouraged about that stuff. But I keep trying to tell people that the values of our cards, our collections, are based on the community. The stronger we build our community of collectors, the bigger we build it, the more demand increases.
Right.
And the more demand increases that will overtake supply, that's where the values of our cards will rise. It's supply and demand dynamics, simply put, right? I'm always talking about that. So for me, what the approach that I've been really trying to emphasize is trying to grow a strong collector base. I would not have sold that card to a guy looking to flip it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then he would try to flip it on eBay and he'd probably get like, I sold the card to you. Do you mind if I tell him?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I sold the card to you for $700. If somebody tried to get that for me for like $700, maybe they put it on eBay, I guarantee you probably go for like $300, $400 before he came back, something like that, right? And they lose money and they get discouraged. So what we have to do is we have to work on building a strong collector base, and that means that we have to help each other. We have to help people build their collections. We have to look out for cards for other people and do fair trades and do things like this to build a strong collector base, and that will eventually build more people into the hobby, and that raises demands and raises the prices of our cards. So that would be my party message. What I learned here, basically, I knew that card had value to you as the individual who collected that. So I helped you get that card in hopes that will strengthen the wrestling community. You go off, you have a podcast, you show it off, you get more people excited about it, and that just continues to grow the base, and then that raises the values of all our cards. That's the way I kind of look at it.
And then all of a sudden he comes back to WWE and the roof's blown off.
I know, right? Right?
I had so many smaller cards that I just hadn't got around to buying yet on my watch list. They're all gone. Like, people just come in and then it's happening with this other talent now that Triple H has taken over. So I really appreciate your time. This is honestly one of my favorite episodes I've done, just because of the digging into the mindset. That's really what I like to do with the content, is talk about collector mindset and how people think certain ways. So Dan, thank you for your time. Let everybody know where they can find you and anything else you've got going on.
Sure. One thing, the last parting message I'll say here for you guys is try to help out your fellow collectors. Try to get the right cards in the right people's hands so that they can really enjoy it and appreciate it. It's not always about like squeezing every little bit of profit out for you guys. Believe me, you will feel very good if you can get the grail card to somebody who can appreciate it. So always try to have that mentality first, guys. You guys can find me on YouTube at The Great Curator, Instagram, The Great Curator, and I'm also on TikTok now as also The Great Curator.
I know are you repurposing your TikTok into Reels?
I'm repurposing my Reels from Instagram into my TikTok, but
the other way.
Yeah, what I'm noticing is that there's different audiences. So I'm probably going to start to focus my TikTok more on information.
Gotcha.
Do little informational videos because I think that's what works on TikTok. And then I'm going to keep Instagram as like my fun.
It's hilarious.
Show off my cards and do Reels. And then on YouTube, we just do long form discussions and vlogs.
Yeah, I've never missed any of your guys' YouTube shows, and the Instagram Reels have been hilarious. So keep up the great work.
Yeah,
thanks again for your time. Thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks again to Dan for coming on the show today, but also for understanding how big of a fan I am of Karrion Kross and hooking me up with this card. This card is officially the crown on top of my Karrion Kross Super Collection, and in my opinion, it squarely puts me at being the #1 Karrion Kross collector in the world. And yeah, some people say, well, this isn't a contest. I agree. This is just kind of a goal thing that I kind of set out for myself when I start buying all his stuff. And it really is kind of a refreshing feeling that's awesome of, hey, you're the number one collector of this guy or this team. And that's why I'm such a proponent of people being super collectors. Because not only do you latch onto something that's not a Hulk Hogan, not a Ric Flair, not a Steve Austin, not a Rock, it's cheaper to buy some of these things. And even in their best cards, like this Superfractor is a fraction of like what Drake owns the Vince McMahon Superfractor for. But yet it's still his best card. And it's just a cool feeling to be the number one collector, as I said, of a specific talent. And I honestly think that if more people were super collectors and just went after everything of a specific talent like I am with Cross, it would actually drive up the value of even the lower end cards of those talents. But again, going back to how I obtained the card, I would not have ever been able to even get a shot at this card if I hadn't made relationships within the hobby and putting out content. If I didn't put myself out there on this channel and the podcast, if I didn't put myself out there on social media saying, hey, I'm the Cross guy, send me your Cross cards, I'm looking for all the Cross stuff, people wouldn't have any idea what I collect. I would just be some guy in my basement, hoarding all my cards and having fun with it, which that's fine. But putting yourself out there in social media, building relationships, making trades, making sales, buying from people, putting out videos, podcasts, all those have kind of been a hobby hack for me. Again, shout out Brett McGrath from the Stacking Slabs podcast. I believe he's the first person that kind of coined that phrase, hobby hack. But it really has opened the floodgates to me to get a lot of cards that I would not otherwise been able to get a shot at. I hope this video was entertaining to you, and I hope it was informative to you. And I guess my ask or my call to action would be, put yourself out there. It doesn't matter what you're collecting, put it out there, because you never know when somebody may have a card that you need, may be able to just give it to you. Maybe they give it to you at a discount. Maybe it's a card that's been locked away, all of a sudden it surfaces because somebody finds out you collect a certain set or a player or whatever. And then my second thing would be more super collectors. Now I know this isn't everyone's style, but again, I think if more people out there were super collecting Omos, AJ Styles, Vince McMahon, Charlotte, Dana Brooke, Hangman Page, Nick Gage, it doesn't matter, pick a name. The more people that go after trying to collect all of the cards of that specific person, it's going to drive interest, I think, towards super collecting because people see what you're doing and they're like, oh, that looks fun. I want to do that, but I don't like that person. I like this person. And then again, even base cards, all the cards are going to start going up in value on the bottom end. Cards that people just think are throwaways right now, that's a way to make them valuable by creating a demand. Thank you guys for watching again. Thanks to Dan for coming on the show. I've got his Instagram below in the show note links, so check that out. Make sure to give him a follow and check out his YouTube channel. I'm going to put a link to that below as well. He does great content on YouTube. And of course, while you're in the show notes, check out all of the ways that you can help show your support for my content to keep this stuff going. And until next time, click the videos on the screen for more great wrestling card content, and I will see you there.